What's up? That's all right, Lion. You can move over now. Hi, everybody. Good morning. As my panel gets ready to go, I want to thank you so much for having me here. And why sports matter? Well, it matters to me in my life in so many ways. He talked to you about my family, but Victor Lopez, Rice University women's track and field coach for 3 decades, then went on to international track, which he still serves. My mother, 2018 IAAF Woman of the Year for her work with gender parity. And now I am the mother of a 15-year-old competitive volleyball player. So why sports matter? Because I live it every day, and it's in my life every day. And not only that, it's in my work. I'm an investigative reporter who does hard news. I use it every day of my life. So when you listen to these amazing people as I sit down, please remember that this is about life and social change and culture change, not just about sports. So, good morning.
Good morning.
We don't have that much time, so we're gonna get right to it, right? So why do sports matter? Let's find out. We'll start with Dr. Phil Veliz, who comes from the University of Michigan, and your research has shown the good outcomes that come when youth play sports. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, so I look at secondary data sets, and for the most part, I just want to see if sports are sports giving us this payoff that we expect? And some of my research finds that, overall, sports, if kids participate in sports, they're going to have better grades. It's going to be associated with the mic.
I'm gonna be Phil. They're gonna have better grades. They're gonna do better. This is research and data showing this. As he gets together, Robin, you work with the sort of Orenda, your organization, and Think Together. Tell us about what you see when you've seen youth play sports in correct environments.
So I think of it sort of in alliteration because I'm a language-based kind of person. But first of all, I would like to set the record straight. Drill team is a sport. Just saying. Some of us have been captain of the drill team once or twice.
Yeah, there you go.
And are going to write a book once. Everything I know, I learned from drill team. I'm just putting that out there. But the 4 areas that I see really enrich students' lives are, first of all, affiliation. Being a drill team kid or a basketball kid or a Think Together kid, the wonderful wraparound service organization that's here, makes you stronger when hard life hits come to you. Another is advocacy. Not all kids have a champion in their life to fight for them. And that's what a coach is, just by default, or the older students who mentor you. The third is agency, and that's what comes from within. Successful people make a correlation between their effort and their outcomes. Vulnerable kids don't always see that. They think that grades are a gamble. How'd you do on your test today? I hope I did okay. Instead of, I studied and I am getting a good grade. And lastly, academics. And that is great coaches emphasize the scholar-athlete, not athlete-scholar, but scholar-athlete role, and that just uplifts all students.
So affiliation, identity, all of that coming into being a better person when you actually do sports. Phil, I want to get to you because I don't want to lose sight of the real numbers about how well kids do if they do a sports program in the right way.
Well, yeah, so with my research, I do find that sports overall, if you participate, you're going to get better grades. You're going to be more likely to be involved in other extracurricular activities. You're more likely to go to college, and you're less likely to use certain substances. But the other thing that I also found is that if kids participate in more than one sport, they do better. The payoff is larger. And again, I kind of look at this in a way where if kids are participating in multiple sports, they're putting themselves in a different network or peer groups. And again, this kind of variation in peer groups is going to have a positive impact because you learn how to deal with other people. So again, if a kid participates in football during the fall and then plays maybe wrestling in the winter, they're going to come into different peer groups. And even then, they might participate in a different sport in the spring. And again, they're navigating different peer groups. And again, this is going to have a positive payoff in the end because they learn, these different ways to interact with people, and they also kind of benefit from this kind of multi-sport participation.
It's interesting, when I ran track, it opened up, I did a lot of things with track, but it opened up my musical taste. It's the first time I ever heard Outkast, with my track and field like peers, and I was like, what? This is the best rap group ever. But in all seriousness, it really is sort of creates different communities, as you're saying, but in those sports environments, it really is about creating the right environment. And Dr. Tiffany Bray, I want to come to you at the Claremont Evaluation Center. You also work with after-school programs right here with LAUSD and Beyond the Bell. What does that atmosphere have to be to make it right and productive and positive?
Yeah, so we have seen very similar kinds of effects that Phil had talked about in relation to some of these beneficial outcomes for kids who are participating in sports. So if they participate in multiple sports, you see better outcomes across developmental domains, both academic, social, emotional, as well as physical fitness. If they participate for multiple years in comparison to 1 year, as well as if they participate for more than 51 days, so they're participating frequently and consistently, then you see beneficial outcomes. But I think it's really important that these outcomes don't just appear because they're in sports.
Right.
There's this qualifier called high quality. So they're in a high quality sports program, which at LAUSD, they invest significantly in professional development of coaches. They invest in evaluation, hence me, right, to be able to continuously track and monitor quality of implementation, like what's happening out in the after-school environment. And then they also invest in ensuring that their kids have the right kinds of experiences that are going to be those developmental drivers for success. Things like positive coaching, having a coach really care and support these kids, giving them authentic leadership opportunities is critical, as well as providing kind of a structure for that technical skill development, being a lot of scaffolding, a lot of rewarding for effort rather than performance. Those are really some of the critical drivers to do that work.
Right, so and part of your evaluation is also evaluating sort of the adult in the room and making sure that that person is doing the right thing and pushing it forward. And in fact, with my 15-year-old, even in the negatives in some of those, like not having the best coach, she's really learned how to like speak for herself, right? And advocate for something that she didn't feel was fair and coming in and talking about that. So it really can kind of show you both sides of it. But I will say Jim Thompson from the Positive Coaching Alliance, he set me straight. He did. About 2 years ago, he came to our school, our high school, to speak. And a lot of the things he was talking about was how detrimental the adult in the room, including the parent, can really be if we start looking at certain things, being too competitive, thinking about the W, the win too much, and forgetting the other stuff, the fun, the passion that comes with playing a sport. So you set me straight, sir, by talking about the one thing that I love, the elevator. Talk to me about that person that you call the elevator.
Sure. As adults, we spend a lot of our time trying to get kids to do certain things. What if we spent our energy on encouraging kids to become the kind of person who wants to do the right thing? Erik Erikson, many years ago, created a term, generativity. Generativity is a focus on the future generations. You know, think about when we're little, it's like me, 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 and then it's family and friends. And a high generative person is somebody who's actually thinking beyond the current generations. I think it's really important to remember how hard it is growing up. I grew up in a small town in North Dakota. My mom was a teacher. I was one of the smartest kids in school, a good athlete. I had everything going for me. It was still hard to grow up.
Yeah.
And you know, I spent time recently at Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico. Positive Coaching Alliance has partnerships with thousands of organizations. The problems kids in Zuni have growing up are not that different from the kids in Palo Alto, maybe the richest community in the history of the world. It's really hard growing up, and with climate change, it's already here. I'm wearing a Joshua Tree National Forest, National Park t-shirt because I just read recently that the Joshua trees are going to go away. With the climate change, it's going to get hotter and drier. The mature trees can stand it, but the younger ones aren't. And so when the old trees die off, we don't have any more Joshua trees. It's getting harder and harder to grow up. And this idea of being a high generative person, what can we do to make, really to rescue the future? And we came upon the term elevator, not OR, like a machine. If you've used the elevators in this hotel, it's pretty wild. Elevator ER, someone who in every situation is looking around, how can I make this situation better? How can I elevate myself, my teammates, the larger community? Again, let's not spend so much time trying to get kids to do certain things. Let's help them become the kind of person who wants to do the right thing.
I mean, think about that. That is sports as social, climate, cultural change. And really that's what it can become. And it can become for, I think, all of us, since I don't necessarily work in it anymore. I was a sports anchor, now investigator reporter, but like I said, I use something I've learned on the court or the field almost every day of my life to navigate something and to look at how to better things around us. So we know that it matters and that it works. So why do we keep canceling, quitting? The first thing that goes when funding's not there is a sports program, is the ability to get a good coach. I know so many young women and men who would be amazing coaches, but there's no money. They can't make the rent. They can't have a living in order to do it. And then they go off to other jobs when they should be coaching. Phil, talk to us about what is that real problem? Where is the gap?
Well, where there's the gap, I mean, what I've found is that, these, particularly public schools, is that our low resource public schools typically offer fewer sports and sports opportunities. This is problematic because that means participation rates drop. Mm-hmm. And because the sport isn't there, kids aren't participating. And if you only carry a certain load of sports, that's it. That's all the kids have. And if you compare this to a high resource school, they're carrying maybe about 30 sports. And again, they can afford it because their parents are going to pay for it. So that means kids who want to do something that's usually off the grid, that's going to be offered. But what if a kid in a low resource community wants to do that as well? They don't have that opportunity. We have to figure out strategies to be able to pool resources so you can bring more money into some of these low resource schools so you can provide more opportunities to give a larger plate of sports to offer so everybody can participate so we can get those participation rates up.
And in the participation rates, in terms of data, I mean, they're down. It's 15, 20% differences.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
Between all of the school. And, not shout out to our hosts here, LA84, but that's what they help do, is bring programs to communities that aren't going to get it, like my South Pasadena high school, where our community basically funds it, right? The parents are kind of putting a lot of money, and that's where all of the resources are coming. But when there's no place to do that, USYVL, Natasha Watley Foundation, other organizations that I've learned from right here in this room that are doing that very same thing. And Tiffany, in your work with LAUC, you've seen that as well. Where are some of the missed opportunities?
Well, I guess when I think about access, I think about two things. One, it's not just access to sports, it's access to high quality sports programs that are going to give kids the right kinds of developmental opportunities that they need to thrive. So kids are going to mature regardless, but in order for them to really promote and kind of imbue themselves with optimal development, they need some of these critical developmental experiences. And things like, again, leadership opportunity and really good connection with others, opportunities for cooperation and teamwork. And if we're not having sports as often in these low resource communities, then where else are our kids going to get these kinds of critical opportunities that they really need in order to thrive? So I think that's really critical.
And let's be real, right? A lot of it comes down to funding. Mm-hmm. It's money, right? We got to talk about that when we do. And for those that may have a little bit of deeper wallets out there, I'm talking to you, what is the cost benefit? Seriously, what is the cost benefit of having sports in the child's life?
Yeah, and we haven't done official cost, benefit analyses, but even if we look at one indicator that you could provide some kind of monetary value to is school absenteeism. So the kids in LAUSD that we see who are regularly engaging in sports and have reported that they're experiencing these high quality experiences with their coaches, with the structure of the environment, et cetera, are attending schools 13 days more on average than the kids who are not participating in sports. So there's a real kind of cost savings to districts when you think about the high cost that's associated with chronic absenteeism.
Right, because each day, you get money from the state or whatever. It can be hundreds of dollars per student per day. Multiply that in LAOC, the second largest school district. That's thousands of dollars.
Well, and they have 11,000 kids that are participating in sports every day after school in the middle school program at LAUSD. So when you think about that number combined with, on average, 13 more days of attendance, then it gets to be significant.
I mean, that is a real game changer. It's great that we have that sort of to know what's happening. But then, we talked about missed opportunities, or I asked you about that, but I wanted to share that with Robin as well. Where are we missing opportunities then to sort of have this happen?
I think a couple of things. One is the hard line between sports and school maybe shouldn't be such a hard line.
Right.
Because schools get money to educate kids, and athletics, sports, and other extracurriculars are part of having an enriched education. So having that hard line is tough. I think it's a deterrent. And the other is defining sport narrowly. Not to sing the drill team song again.
Go, girl, sing it.
But
I love
not
it.
everybody wants to throw or kick a ball. But there are lots of ways. There's dance teams. There are teams now. It's not an individual activity anymore. Drill team, squads, and so forth. So, and there are just a variety of other team activities that, if we include under the umbrella of an enriched education, can be funded through traditional means with the augmentation of friends and supporters like those in this.
So not compartmentalize sports away. You actually had me thinking of something, STEAM, right? It goes STEM, and then they added arts and STEAM. It's science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and sports. STEAMs. Just saying, you can hashtag that. I'll let you guys have it. Jim, though, you see this every day. You go to schools all over the country, those that are high, performing schools with a lot of funding, those that aren't. Is there something that you see that works well in all of those? And where do you see the missed opportunities?
Yeah, Tiffany, you mentioned the term leadership. We define leadership as the ability to make other people better. So it's open to everybody. And again, going back to this idea of an elevator, if a coach says, we want everybody in his team, we can't be the best team. I'm going to parrot Doc Rivers here. We can't be the best team we can be unless every one of us is the best we can be and help each other. I think, and then thinking, I've been thinking a lot about identity, character, and culture and how those three things go together. Character, I ran across this definition, and I actually changed my definition of character. Character is doing the right thing when it matters. Very often we have an opportunity to do things, and it doesn't really matter, and then crunch time comes, and that's what character is. Identity is really the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, and we revise that story over time based on what happens to us. And one of the things coaches can do very easily is ask kids to say, okay, I want you to think about something about yourself that you like. And then have the kids say it and pair up and say, one of the things I like about myself is and then you give it back to me. And then one of the things I like about you. These are things that can be the raw material for the identity, for the story, that I'm the kind of person who does the right thing when it matters.
And Phil, just playing off of that, can you use some of sort of that more untangible stuff, but really tangible if you think about it, but not necessarily data, in some of the stuff that you do? I mean, when you see kids playing sports and the research that you do you see that is happening? Those relationships are building.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm using data, so I can't really see those on the ground. So I can't really answer that question the way you want to, because we have to understand that I'm using large data sets, so I can't really untangle kind of the processes that are happening between these athletes interacting face to face. So I can't really answer that
But
question.
having the athletes come together, I mean,
Yeah.
Tiffany, if you want to play on, but having the athletes come together and having that space, that would help create those atmospheres and that right environment that we've been talking about.
Yes, it
Yeah.
would happen. So again, if athletes are put in the right environment with a great coach, you're going to see, you're going to have a positive experience from it.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what Tiffany was talking about, doing sports the right way. I think what you're saying is you're looking at big data,
Yeah.
and there's going to be some coaches who aren't doing it the right way, some who are doing it the right way, and just being part of sports is helpful to kids.
Yes, overall.
And then, if they can have a coach who does it the right way, that helps them feel like I'm a valuable person, that's amazing.
Then they
And
reap
Tiffany.
all of these developmental benefits that are really critical for their life.
Yeah, I mean, you see what just happened here?
Yeah.
That is why sports matter, really, that is. And you guys just kind of like put it all together sort of in that one space to really sort of understand that it's beyond just what happens on a court or in a field sometimes, and that the data can be seen sort of stretched out way.
Well, with the data as well as we can see where we need to do better or do more work.
So tell
Just
us about
because
that.
A lot of the stuff I also do is I look at kind of which sports provide the best outcomes. And if we start to categorize this between contact sports like football, semi-contact sports like basketball, and non-contact sports like track and field, we see that the high contact sports have the worst outcomes while the non-contact sports have the best. And again, once you start to kind of control for all these other individual characteristics, that still remains. So again, it's not saying that the sport is bad, it's that we need to kind of see where we know where to look. We know where the problem is. It's not a problem, but we know where to look, and we know where we need to do some fixing. So.
And Robin, you're nodding your head on that. Where do you see that?
Well, I'm just thinking, as a researcher, what we do is we go into schools and districts that have historically struggling students and figure out what the systemic barriers are and turn them around. And the question that we ask, which is golden, is under what conditions? So just, okay, things are not working and students aren't succeeding, but under what conditions would they? And it applies here. So, you may not have natural talent for whatever the sport is, but under what conditions would you succeed? And if we just ask that question and measure it, like you were saying, frequently, we could really tighten up the experiences kids have. One of the equity hooks that we use all the time is a star does not a constellation make. And really what we're talking about here is individual stars shine brightly, but in athletics or in extracurricular activities or team sports, you end up with these constellations that are just brilliant and beautiful and add a layer of value and richness that individual experience just cannot compete with.
I'm going to see the stars way differently now that you said that. So we want to actually open it up to you. We've given you so much information here. There are so many of you out in the room with your own experiences. There are mics around in different places. If you want to pick it up, this is not necessarily a place to ask a question, but just kind of, you've heard what we're saying. These are places where you live and breathe every day. Something that's happening in your own communities that you like to speak about. Is anyone out there with the mic that wants to say something? Don't be shy. This is not a shy room.
Track and field went up 70.
Tom, you got a mic now. That's Tom Labange. I know this gentleman.
Okay.
One of our esteemed
yeah,
government officials, retired, but not really retired.
I love you.
Thank you.
Fields, sports fields, gyms, parks, the condition of them, if they're kept up or if they're enhanced, it makes people want to come. When we built a new field at our high school, John Marshall, city district, combination city and LAUSD, women's participation in sports went through the roof. So those type of things, do any of you see that issue? And also keeping public parks up and participation.
All right, well, I did say no questions, but I'm going to let you slide just for right now, because I think it's a really good, if there's no place to go, if you build it, they will come, right, kind of thing. But the environment also is the physical place, is the place that you feel comfortable in doing that, which, again, LA84 has been able to provide. And one quick commentary, my husband was part of the documentary on ESPN about Roberto Clemente, and one of the biggest sadnesses that we have down in Puerto Rico is his legacy, that structure that he had built for them is just in shambles. And so nobody goes there. There's no place to go. And other baseball athletes from Puerto Rico have luckily come in and sort of filled that void. But wow, when you see it on video and you see just the grass overgrown and the place that Roberto tried to build for future generations really makes you sad.
Yeah.
So environment-wise, right, the actual environment. Jim, I'll start with you because, again, you traveled all over the place. I mean, if there's a field, will people get there? Will they go?
Yeah, people, when you walk into an environment, my wife and I helped start a nonprofit in San Jose called Recovery Cafe San Jose, which works with homeless, mentally ill, and drug-addicted people. And we were fortunate enough to get $1 million grant from the city of San Jose, and it is fabulously beautiful. And these are people, maybe they've got a tent out in the street somewhere, and they come into this, and they become a member. They have to be clean and sober for 24 hours. For some people, they haven't been clean and sober for 24 hours for 20 years. So that environment really matters. But I also want to talk about psychological safety. There was a study Google looked at all the different teams in Google, the ones that performed really well, the ones that didn't, and what was it that made the good ones good? And all of them had hardworking people, all of them had smart people. The difference was psychological safety. The people on the high-performing teams felt like they could be themselves and they were accepted. They didn't have to put on a mask. And one quick story, the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in South Dakota, a woman named Jocelyn Charger, young woman. She went off to college and crashed and burned, came back, started using drugs. She was in a drug house on the reservation, and she'd lost like 50 pounds. And one day, her cousin came and grabbed her by the shoulder and said, "Your tribe needs you." Wow. They went into one of those sweat houses, and she became the leader of this. The older people of the tribe didn't want to do this, but she got all the young people, and they did this huge march. And I think the key words there is, you are needed. When I was at the Zuni Pueblo a few weeks ago, I told that story, and they had coaches one night and parents the other night, and this one coach came up to me and said, I went home last night. We don't want to say we need somebody because, especially tough men like us.
Or like us.
He went home and he told his wife, "I really need you." And I said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, she kind of teared up, and I teared up." And I think if there's one thing a coach can do, it's can say to kids, "We need you. We need you on this team."
It's interesting. I tell my daughter this all the time. Sometimes in your weaknesses and your vulnerabilities where you really find your strength.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do when you're constantly being told to push harder, be tougher. Sometimes you have to find that weakness to find your real inner strength kind of like pouring out. Anyone else have any commentary at all or any? Yes, sir.
If it's intuitive, the participation in multiple sports is better than participation in one. Why do so many coaches insist their kids be devoted to one sport only, and what can we do about it?
We're changing the format here. That's it. It's all over here. All right. Tiffany, Jim, I know you want to comment, but Tiffany, can you answer that? And then Jim, if you like.
Well, I don't know if I have an answer to that one, which was a great question. But I think for me, it's about getting shared agreement about what sports is and what high quality means. And if high quality means participating in multiple sports because you see beneficial effects, then that has to be part of the conversation. It's almost like the conversation is any sport is beneficial. And we, Phil, like maybe not so much. For me, that's not really true either, because it has to be high quality and have these characteristics. So thinking about maybe shifting the conversation to just any sport to high quality sports and what are the characteristics of that might help us move towards having increased kind of conversation about some of these different indicators.
And before I get to you, Jim, only because I personally lived this with my daughter who quit track, great high jumper, just to only play volleyball full year round, and we cried. Like it was like a crying session in my house in particular with track being life. But the idea that I didn't want it to be that structured. I didn't want it to be that much, and we've kind of taken off the Band-Aid of being super competitive, and we are now playing, like she and I are going to play in a beach tournament the next day for fun, just us, and she's gotten better. She's gotten better at her sport by taking that off. And then now she's like, let me just go do track. I'm going to find the time and do it because it's fun creating those different communities that you were saying in those different sports. But Jim, you wanted to chime in on
Yeah,
that.
it's a great question. I think it goes back again to identity. A coach gets identity very often from, I'm the kind of person who can win games, who can make a good team. And up to a point, more is better. So if a kid is playing baseball during baseball season and then does fall ball, up to a point that can make the kid a better baseball player, it may not make him a better person. So I think we need to not just think about the identity of the kids, but the identity of the coaches. I'm the kind of person who has the total welfare of my players in mind. And that means I want to live up to that identity, and that means I'm going to encourage them to play soccer or golf or tennis or whatever.
Yeah, and P.S., one of the two coaches, when my daughter made that transition, belittled her and made her feel bad for not going to a practice and we moved out of that. You know, supposedly the shiny penny, like the one that's like the best team or whatever, like, nope, that's not going to work for us. And the other coach was really great about supporting her doing both. Go ahead,
Just
Robin.
wanted to say, as we do systems work in the schools, the reason why it is because the incentives are not aligned to having students participate in different sports. That's just the plain answer. The incentives are built to have students be dedicated and devoted to one sport, to win, to be loyal to that one coach, and that brings in resources to the school and attention. So the answer is to change the system so that the incentives are not that.
Incentivize all. That's a great point. Yeah. We only have a few minutes left, and so this is like our last minute timeout. And I really wanted to, when we leave here, to have something, not only the data and the ideas and the resources to really move this conversation forward, but tell us. Did you have one more comment? Okay, one more.
It's a lot of pressure now.
No, now you better go.
Yeah, I just had one thing that I'm experiencing being from a charter school is the money, the funding that is made mainly for like district schools or schools that are in districts, and being a smaller charter and being able to bridge the gap. We can't compete or participate with some of those bigger schools who have everything that we need to be involved in, but we can't because of some of the funding and how it goes. I don't know what's the way around that funding, or maybe when we write grants for bigger schools or bigger grants, that more schools that don't fall under a certain umbrella can still be a part of some of those events or some of those experience or get access to that. I think that's one thing that I would think about.
That's a really good point, bringing in some of the smaller, not as well-funded schools into maybe like a tournament or something where some of the larger schools are, just so that they get that experience. And I know I'm using a lot of personal stories, but this all triggers because, again, I told you I'd live this every day. We went to a tournament recently where there was a school from South LA that my daughter had never played in her league who came in, and it's a tournament that opens the doors to all these folks. And if the team doesn't have enough money to give, for their team to participate, they sponsor it. They sponsor that team into the tournament, which I thought, that is the most amazing thing. And they were awesome volleyball players. Just saying. 1:13 left. This is our timeout. So let's do this, and then we can yell team just like Coach Val. What should we do? What can we do right now to make more play equity in our communities? Tiffany.
I mean, for me, you really need to invest in quality. And the challenge is that quality is variable, in that we don't always have the same coaches that are consistent across time. So they're coming in and out. So we need to invest in the systems that would allow us to ensure that the kids who are participating in these sports programs are receiving the highest quality possible.
Robin.
For me, it would be to have the courage to challenge the normalization that exists right now that disrespects some students. I'll give you your due from Marshall, but I'm from Belmont, just saying. I know, so it's okay, it's all right. But when you see the fields in one neighborhood and you compare them to the fields in another, it's night and day, and how is that okay? So just to have the courage to stand up and say, that's a social justice issue, it's not okay, we're gonna challenge this, it's not normal, it's not okay.
Absolutely. Phil.
I'll keep it quick. So I would say hold high resource schools accountable to help distribute some of the wealth around, because One of the things here is that you're talking about access to fields, and some of those high resource schools charge other schools to use their field.
That's right.
Why?
Amen.
I mean,
Jim,
give them that space. That's it.
I love that. And Jim, last one.
Yeah, I agree with all that about the social justice thing. Every kid, especially kids who coming from challenging situations, need an adult to say to them, I don't care how you perform. You're important to me. I care about you. Let's go out there and have fun. And I love you.
I love that, and I love you all for being here. Thank you so much for the panel. Make some change out there. This is a social justice issue, and we can all be the change. Play equity, everyone. Thank you so much.